Today I woke up and this was in my mail. This is my CISSP certificate, the hard copy of the certificate, and I thought, what better way or what better sign for me to make a video about everything you need to know about how to pass the CISSP exam. And I commit that this is going to be the best guide on the internet, on YouTube, around the topic. I will share with you all the resources I used, the method, and my study approach that I implemented in order to pass the exam, tips and tricks that I think will make a difference in your efforts, and also what you need to do after you get that beautiful printout at the end of your exam saying, congratulations, you passed, and receiving that physical certificate for yourself. My name is Yannis, former lawyer turned IT GRC expert, and you and I together are going on a journey to take you from zero to IT GRC hero. Let's go. Alright, as I said, this is going to be a very comprehensive video about how you will pass the CISSP exam. I'm not going to go through content itself. I'm not going to teach you about the content of the CISSP exam, but I will show you everything when it comes to methodology, when it comes to resources, and everything else you need to know in order to succeed in your efforts. But first, let me put this thing down because it actually hurts quite a lot holding this. Cinematography is nice, but we need to balance it with practicality. So, let's start with the fundamentals and the basics. What is the CISSP? The CISSP is an acronym, it's a very well recognized acronym in the industry, and it stands for Certified Information System Security Professional. It is the most recognized certification that is provided by ISC2 or ISC2. I think they go with ISC2, and ISC2 stands for International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium. I messed this acronym up at least 15 times, but here we are. This certification is considered the golden standard in the industry of information security and by extension in the industry of IT GRC, which is what this YouTube channel is all about. This certification is really recognized in the field. I will also put some resources down below showing some numbers as well. Last time I checked, it was estimated that about 70,000 job postings currently available have the CISSP reference, whether as a must-have or as a nice-to-have, but it is a very well-recognized certification, and that is telling a lot about its power, about its recognizability, about why it's so lucrative and so attractive for people in the field to attempt to obtain it. The CISSP exam covers a total of 8 different domains. These are as follows. Number 1, security and risk management. Number 2, asset security. Number 3, security architecture and engineering. Number 4, communication and network security. Number 5, identity and access management. Number 6, security assessment and testing. Number 7, security operations. And number 8, software development security. So, as you can see, this is a very wide content and a very wide scope, very wide coverage of that certification. As you might have heard in other resources as well, or other people talking about the CISSP, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. We don't use inches and miles here, we use kilometers and meters, but you get the gist. It's very wide in terms of the coverage, but it doesn't go into a very big level of detail. Keep that in mind when you're studying. You are required to have a wide range of knowledge and expertise in order to pass the CISSP exam. Some other things that you should know before even attempting the CISSP exam, and again, go back to ISC2 if you want to see all the requirements there and be sure that you are up to date. You need to have at least 5 years of experience in at least 2 of the 8 domains, practical experience, or if you hold another certification from a different recognized certification body such as ISACA or Cisco or other certificate authorities out there, then you can get a 1-year voucher so that you need 4 years of experience in those 2 domains in order to get certified. If you don't meet those requirements, you can become an associate. It's not certified exactly, but you are at least recognized from ISC2 that you have passed the exam and that you're working towards building those 4 or 5 years of prior experience in order to be formally certified. I will explain more about the endorsement process and what we need to do to be officially certified further down the line. So for now, let's just keep it at that. So these are the basics of the CISSP exam. One more thing to keep into account is the structure of the exam, as well as what it includes, what you should expect in the day of the examination. The CISSP certification and the exam itself is an automatic, as a computerized examination, so you're doing it in front of a computer. It's a multiple choice exam, so you are going through a set of questions which are ranging from between 100 to 150, depending on your progress and depending on how well you're doing in the exam. And then, of course, you need to pick the right one. And it utilizes, as of this point in time, the CAT, or the computerized adaptive testing, which is a set of algorithms that nobody knows how they work exactly, but it adapts to the capabilities and the knowledge of the person who is being tested. So the CAT is going to gauge your expertise in those 8 domains that I mentioned before, and it's going to adapt itself so that it starts targeting your weakest areas, trying to really see if you have what it takes to be CISSP-certified. And frankly, it does a great job at that. But the CAT is there to make sure that you are tested as thoroughly as possible in the domains of your biggest weakness. Other than that, make sure that you are familiar with the structure. So like I said, 100 questions to 150 questions. It can be any number between 100 and 150. 100 is the minimum, so you cannot have anything less than 100, but you can have up to 150. And in those first 100 questions, there's going to be 25 questions that are beta questions, meaning they are not actually scored. They're there in order to be tested for their efficiency, for their ease of use, whether they are appropriate and relevant to the exam. And then ISC2 decides whether to discard them or to use them, or maybe make changes to them. I don't know how they work, to be completely honest, in ISC2 or ISC2, but that's the gist of it. All right, so we covered the basics of what the CISSP is and what you should expect in the exam itself, what is the coverage of the CISSP, how you are going to be tested with the CAT system that is in place. Now we can dive deeper into everything you need to know about how to actually pass the CISSP exam, and my tips and tricks to make sure that you will do that and you will be successful. Before we do that though, let me change the mood a bit because it's getting a bit dark, so see you in a bit. Here we are. Better background, better lighting. I love the red at the back. Before we get into the specifics, I want to point something out. When I first started studying for the CISSP exam, I had no technical capabilities and skills whatsoever. And that's the motif, let's say, behind this YouTube channel. It's dedicated to people that have limited to no prior technical knowledge getting into IT GRC. However, I had experience on the first 2 domains of the CISSP, which are security and risk management and asset management. So to give you the idea or the perspective that I started from that standpoint, but of course you might have a different background and thus you might have a different set of skills and knowledge prior to pursuing this exam. I won't go into the specifics of why I think certifications are important, which I do, by the way, but I've made a separate video that you can check and see if you agree or disagree with that one. I will link it in the description down below. And now we are moving on into the specifics, and that is what content did I use to study for the CISSP. I'm going to cover the different materials that I used in the following order. I'm going to start with the, let's say, hard copies or material that is read friendly and I used to read different information. Then I'm going to go through material that is found usually online, that can be audio, video, or a combination of the two. And then at the end I will also share some resources about testing and what testing methods are used in order to prepare for the CISSP prior to the exam. Starting off with the readable material is the official study guide. I'm going to link that also below. That was my first exposure to the CISSP. The study guide is a very big book. It is about 1,000 pages, a bit more than 1,000 pages actually, plus the question database that I used on the side. But the book itself is extremely voluminous. It's huge, absolutely, and it contains a bunch of different information that really is overwhelming if you don't have the right process to go about it. I think the official study guide is a very good, I would say almost perfect starting point for the CISSP, for the reason that it gives you almost everything that you need to know for the exam. Keeping in mind, of course, that ISC2 also indicate that the book itself is not enough for you to pass the exam, or at least that's the consensus, is that you need more than just the book, which is just 1,000 pages and more. But the book itself supposedly is not enough. So always use multiple resources and not just focus on one. The CIBEX book is very wide in terms of coverage. As I mentioned, there's 8 domains and the book covers all 8 domains in quite a lot of width. Not super deep, but still deep enough. And I would suggest you at least have a look at it and see if going through it is your cup of tea. I know that for some or even most people it's not their cup of tea, but it could be the case that it's not their cup of tea or your cup of tea simply because it's a bit dry. It's a lot of dry information that is not very well organized and structured. You can find information scattered throughout the book, but in any case, I do feel that it is a great starting point. If you want to be serious about the exam, you need to start with the CIBEX official study guide and go from there. I will explain a bit later what process I followed to study and how I use the different materials. So the CISSP official study guide for me is a 7 out of 10, and that is because of the volume of the information and also the dryness of the content, but I still think it's a very nice resource to use and to have in your arsenal. The second resource I used was the Destination Certification CISSP Study Guide. I think it's a great resource. If you don't know Destination Certification, they are an authority, they're a very well-known body of knowledge and information, and also helping out with certifications. I'm not endorsing them, even though if they're happy they can reach out to me and I can officially become their sponsor when it comes to their study guide for the CISSP. I think it's a fantastic resource. It doesn't cover the domains in as much detail as the official study guide, but at the same time it's way less dry and way more pleasant to read. They have a bunch of tables and illustrations, and the information is laid out in a better way, in my opinion, that is more reader friendly and easier to digest and absorb. It also has the same advantage that it is available in both digital and physical format. I used the digital version in Kindle, so I had it actually in my Kindle and I could just take it wherever I wanted and study in the train, on the bus, when I had a few moments when I was going out and so on. It can help you understand the topics in a way that is easier to digest and easier to understand because it's simpler and it's more alive. Destination Certification, I think it's a very good resource and I would definitely invest in that. I think it's an 8 out of 10. It's really good when it comes to the content. It's easy to understand, it's portable, it is user-friendly, concise, and has nice illustrations. These were the resources I used when it comes to books and hard copies and reading certain content, understanding it, making notes and so on. That was part of the process. And then I used additional resources to reinforce or to further improve my understanding of those different concepts and content. Going into that, then I used the CISSP Exam Cram by Pete Zerger. I think this guy is fantastic. It's an 8-hour long video that I think I've watched at least 5 times until the time I went for my CISSP exam. I think Pete is doing a fantastic job at explaining the key concepts in ways that really stick, because he gives you examples, he adds some interesting concepts and interesting information in there. He is very easy to understand. He speaks in a good pace. He also uses practical examples, and to top it all off, he adds a bit of sauce and a bit of spice into it. He has his way of delivering information, and I would 100% recommend going through his video at least once before your exam in order to revamp, let's say, your understanding and your knowledge about the different domains. I think it's fantastic and a definite must watch and listen to. The video from Pete Zerger, I think, is a 9 out of 10. Alright, next one is the CISSP Mind Maps by Destination Certification. Now, that name sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's exactly the same resource that I mentioned earlier, but it's just in video format as opposed to read format. The guys over there, they took the content from their book and they transformed it into short and easily digestible, once again, videos for easy consumption. Again, a very good resource. I would highly recommend it. It's similar to Pete Zerger's resource, but it's chunked in smaller pieces, so it's not a one video that you can watch. Of course, you can do that. You can view the playlists and you can watch it in one go, but I think they are able to narrow down on the different topics in interesting ways. They have a nice way of creating diagrams of the different concepts, so you can clearly see where each concept fits in the bigger picture of CSSP and of the different domains. I would definitely recommend this one. Fantastic resource. The CSSP mind maps, I think, is an easy 8 out of 10. Alright, in terms of other resources that I used when it comes to video format, I would say that in this case, my biggest friend was the internet, of course, and YouTube in general is a real goldmine of information. I use videos because I'm a visual learner, and personally I like listening and viewing concepts, not just reading information. Those additional resources that I used, such as Computer File, CBT Nuggets, and I have a few more, I will link all of those, as I said before, in the description below. I think you can really supplement your learning by going through additional content and of course focusing on the areas that you think you are lacking. I remember I focused quite a lot on encryption, for example, authentication methods, access. These were the areas where I needed some more work. So YouTube for me was a real godsend because I could just find all that information in useful videos and by very skilled creators. So that really helped zoom in and understand key concepts as well. I would say 10 out of 10. YouTube videos are a must, of course. Okay, one more thing I did to get a better understanding of the CSSP as an exam, but also the experiences of other people, was I lurked in the shadows of the CSSP subreddit. I think that's a fantastic place to be if you want to get a better understanding of the CSSP as a whole, the examination process, the testing process, the post-testing process, the preparation, the different challenges and the different experiences that other people had, their successes and their failures. I think Reddit has a lot of information and there's a lot of people that share useful insights, personal insights, but also objectively useful information. I will come back to Reddit again in a bit, but I think that if you can find a community in general that you can use to leverage other people's experience and other people's knowledge, that could be Reddit or Discord or some other online platform, I think that's a great idea and you should definitely join a team or a group that is aimed towards that. The CSSP subreddit is, for me, a 10 out of 10. Definitely recommend that one. All right, and last one, when it comes to learning, I would say is not going to surprise you very much, but it has to do with some new technology that is popping up and is making waves in the world, and that is AI, of course. ChatGPT was I would say, my best friend in that regard. ChatGPT is a great way to reinforce what you know and to visualize and conceptualize topics in ways you might not necessarily find in official material or other material out there on the internet. Of course, you know it very well, but you can use ChatGPT in so many different ways. You can use it to explain and simplify concepts. You can use it to compare information or to collect multiple sources of information and put it all in one, to analyze certain data and certain information and give you a gist, to summarize. The possibilities are, of course, endless. My personal use case was either I would ask it to simplify concepts, terms, and ideas in ways that are memorable and easy to understand. So, for example, I would ask it to explain a topic by giving me a very extreme example or a very memorable example, or summarize information that is about a certain topic. For example, give me a very quick overview of symmetric encryption, or consolidate all of the information in tables that I can then go back to and review and even print. I printed some of those for future use. Just be sure to give it the right instructions, of course, and also be sure to double check that information because you need to be 100% sure that it is accurate and concise. But in any case, ChatGPT 10 out of 10. I would say it depends on your use case and depends how you use it, but if you use it right, I think it's invaluable and amazing to use. And now we are going to cover the ways that I think are best in order to test yourself prior to the exam and during your preparation process. For this, I used a few different resources and I would recommend all of them to different extents, but first one is Boson. So Boson is a very popular one. It's been there for a while. Boson is a question bank that is out there that you can use to test yourself against the 8 domains. They break down the different testing banks by domain. Of course, you can create your custom tests, including all 8 domains or questions from all 8 domains. To be completely honest with you, I think it's not worth it as much. And I will explain why that is the case further down the line. I have a resource that I think is better. But either way, Boson is a good way to test yourself against the 8 domains. If you have the money to invest, because it's not a free resource, keep that in mind. But I would say that it's a 6 out of 10 in that regard, that you can still use it if you think you need to supplement your testing with an online bank. The reason why I think Boson is not as great, or certainly not the greatest, is because there is another resource that I would highly suggest, and that is the Learn Z or Z app, that I think is better than Boson simply because of the fact that it's available in mobile. It's available in both iOS and Android, and that makes it very easy, very portable, very user-friendly once again. It's also paid, so you need to pay it if you want to use its full extent and all of the questions that are included. But I think it's worth it. You can have a subscription of a certain amount of time and then you can use it accordingly. The good thing about it obviously is the fact that it's portable. So if you're standing in the queue waiting for your food, or if you're waiting in a shop queue, for example, I think taking out your mobile phone and doing a 10-question quiz in Learn Z app or Z app, I think it's a great idea and very easy to use. So I would give it definitely an 8 out of 10. The actual data banks, I think more or less they're the same between Boson and the Learn Z app. They might be using actually the same exact question databases, but either way, I think it's a great one. So definitely keep that in your radar as well. All right, and last one, and potentially the most useful out of all of them, is the quantum exams. What can I say about the quantum exams? I think it's a fantastic way to end your testing and your preparation when it comes to the CISSP. What I did with the quantum exams is I used it right before, a couple weeks or 3 weeks or so before my actual test date, in order to test myself against the concepts and the domains of the CISSP once again, with the difference being that the quantum exam question dataset is way more challenging than any of the other resources that I mentioned before when it comes to testing. I think it's even more difficult than the actual exam, surprisingly, but that's a good thing because it actually prepares you for these challenging questions that you will get eventually in that exam. But the good thing about it is that it explains to you why you messed up and what the right answer is, what the wrong answers are, and why they're wrong and why the right one is the right one. Also a very nice resource. It also has a timer so you can time yourself. We will talk about time management later as well, but I think timing and the fact that it is a difficult question database really gives it an edge, and you should definitely use it. Also not free, but I think it's worth every penny. The person or one of the people behind this app, Dark Helm, is also part of the subreddit that I mentioned earlier, the CISSP subreddit, and he's really active there. So if you have any questions, if you want to challenge him on the different responses that the application is giving, you can also do that. He will explain things in more detail. I think it's a great resource and definitely recommend 10 out of 10 as well. For this one, I would depend on that definitely if I was preparing for the CISSP again. These are the resources I would definitely recommend. These are the key ones that I used for my own journey and to pass the CISSP exam. Of course, you might have different preferences. You might think that videos are better for you, or you prefer book related content as well. You can pick and choose whichever you prefer. I would recommend you get a wide coverage and a wide range because, as I said, there's no one resource that is enough for the CISSP. I think you need to have a few different ones. Feel free to use those, but of course, expand and elaborate on other ones as well. I think there's so much more you can find out there about the CISSP. So my study process for the CISSP, as I alluded to earlier, is I focused initially on the book content and material, so the official study guide and the destination certification study book. I took notes, of course, and make sure that I understand the concepts when I first read the content. I then supplemented the information that I received through videos and other resources, so ChatGPT, to add more depth and to personalize my study, because I could ask it whatever. And then, of course, taking notes, making sure that I test myself in the process, in the meantime, in an iterative way. So I would test myself, then I would go back to study the areas and domains that were the weakest for me, then again study, do the tests, and have that cycle repeat and repeat until I felt ready. There's no time, of course, where I felt 100% ready. I felt there was a time that I felt quite ready for it, but you will know when you get there that you are ready to take the exam. I would say once you start scoring high, let's say on those test banks, around 70 to 80% and around 50 to 60% actually on the quantum testing, because that is way more difficult, as I mentioned, then you are there more or less. But you be your own judge and you will figure out when you feel ready to go for the exam. That's where you should just go for it and book your date. I know though why you're here. You're here for the tips and the tricks. So I'm gonna give you some tips and tricks in order to get the best out of your experience studying for the CISSP. So here we go. All right, tip number 1, plan your test day as soon as possible. Don't do the same as I did, where I postponed my date of examination for I don't know how many years. I was studying on and off, but I think in reality you need to really put a time and say, okay, this is my deadline. I will study backwards, so I have 6 months or 1 year or 3 months to study for my CISSP exam. Put that in your calendar and actually book it by the exam date, and then you will have a deadline that you need to meet, and then it's a project, and then you go back and you plan forward. My first tip: plan your test date. Also, one good thing to note about the test date is the fact that you can occasionally, and that is a recurring offer from ISC2, but it doesn't happen all the time. Currently, I think it is available, but you can buy the peace of mind option, which basically means you pay a bit extra for the certification. So I don't remember the exact amount, but it's about $200 or $300 or euros on top of the price. And that gives you a guarantee that if you fail the first time, you can resit the exam with no added cost within a limited amount of time, within I think a couple of weeks or something like that. But if you think that is useful for you, I would highly recommend considering the peace of mind option for the test. Tip number 2, I mentioned that earlier, and that is use multiple resources. Don't get hung up on just one resource where you have so many different options that you can choose from, and customize and personalize your studying process. What worked for me doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna work for you. I'm giving you some suggestions from my personal experience, but your own style might be different. Focus on whatever works for you, whether that is reading content, understanding through video or audiobooks or visuals or anything else. Testing might be best for you to understand the key concepts and the key material, but either way, focus on the material that you think suits you best and customize and personalize your experience. All right, the third tip is use your opportunities to take exams and testing wisely. What I mean by that is exams and going through testing and question banks is a great way to understand and identify pain points and weak areas. And that's, I think, the best way to use those is to understand where you're lacking in terms of understanding and knowledge, and where you need to supplement your knowledge. So use testing wisely. Don't overdo it. If you think that testing is not as needed, especially in the beginning, I would say don't focus on testing in the very beginning, but as soon as you get the hang of it and as soon as you get more and more information, start using testing in order to gauge your preparedness and to gauge which areas need more attention to testing, but be mindful of how you actually apply the testing. Tip number 4, I mentioned this one before, and it is, if you can, join a community. Join that subreddit thread that I mentioned before, or that Discord community or another community that you can form with your colleagues or your friends. If you want to study together, a study group, join a community and interact with people, because they can definitely improve your experience and they can highlight areas where they may have more knowledge and they can teach you concepts and ideas in a very easily understandable way. Join communities and talk to people. I think that's a really, really good thing to do if you're going for any certification and also for CISSP, of course. All right, tip number 5. That's one of the things that I screwed up when I went for the exam, and I mentioned that earlier, and that is get enough sleep. In that section, I would also say get enough sleep, prepare yourself physically and mentally the best way you can. If you are okay with listening to some music before the exam, or if you are better off focusing on something else, reading a book or going out with your friends just to de-escalate before the exam, maybe that's a good idea for you. But in any case, take care of yourself, especially before the exam, the day before the exam and the day of the exam. Of course, take care of yourself throughout your life, but especially before the examination day and during the examination day, try to get enough rest if you can, of course, if circumstances allow, and then be well rested and go out there and face this beast and slay it. Tip number 6. Tip number 6 is extremely important, and that is time management. If there's one thing about the CISSP, apart from the knowledge that you need to have, the depth of knowledge and the coverage, is managing time properly. This is the most important thing, and I know a lot of people failing because they didn't manage their time properly, time ran out, and then, sorry, you failed because you didn't answer the set amount of questions, or you just failed because you didn't manage to get the score that you require in order to pass the CISSP. Time management is crucial, and the way I would approach it, the way I suggest you approach it, is have a set amount of time as a target for your exam. You have 100 to 150 questions for the exam, and I would suggest you assume that you're going to go to 150. So that's the starting point. You're not going to go to 100, you're gonna go all the way to 150, because the CAT, as I mentioned, needs to gauge your performance and your capability, so it's gonna extend the exam until the 150th question, and then you have 3 hours, which is 180 minutes, to go for the exam. You have a maximum of 3 hours. So if you divide 180 minutes with 150 questions, you have about 1.5 minutes per question. 1.2 or something like that. Try to focus on each question for approximately that amount of time. I know it's not easy, and I'm not saying that you should, for every single question, look on the clock that's ticking on some side of the screen and then looking back and then really stressing about it, but try to put some guidelines and put some target so that you can aim for a certain amount of time. Of course, some questions will take 20 seconds because you know the answer immediately. You just select the right answer and then you go to the next. Some questions might take more time for you. It might take 2 minutes, let's say 2.5 minutes to analyze. Maybe there's a very long question and a lot of lines in each answer. That will depend, of course, but let's say on average, try to focus about 1.5 minutes per question. And then I would say a good goal to have is try to finish the 100th question by the 2-hour mark. If you finish 100 questions in 2 hours, I think you're good to go. And then you have 50 more questions that you can finish within 1 hour. So I think that should be quite doable. But very important, time management, and also try to test your time management capabilities by going through some of the testing that we covered earlier. For example, the quantum exam has a timed option where you can actually test yourself with time, so you can see how well you perform under time pressure, let's say. Always make sure that time management is there and practice that. It's very, very important. I think it's the most important thing right after the actual knowledge that you need to have for each domain. Next up is a way to address the questions. Again, that's how I did it. That's how I would recommend you do it, but it doesn't mean it's gonna work for you. But I would suggest you read every single question at least twice, and you read every single answer at least twice. What I did is I read the question once, then I read the answers once, and then I reread the question one more time, and then I reread the answers one more time. And sometimes I would also go the other way around, just randomly. I would read the answers first, and then I would read the question. That also depends. Maybe you can follow that approach. But in any case, try to understand the question very well. Look for those hidden words. As I said, they're not actually hidden. They are capitalized, so you will see those most, those least, most likely, less likely, all of those keywords that will either try to trick you or steer you to a particular answer. Read those very carefully, take those into account, and don't rush. And I would say, after you read those answers, try to eliminate at least 2 of them. Eliminate 2 of them. I think 90% of the time it's easy to eliminate at least 2 options that you have, so you are left with 2 more. And then, of course, you need to use critical thinking and your knowledge to understand which of the other 2 options is the best out of the 2. You're not always looking for the only correct answer, but you're in some cases looking for the most correct answer. You have a set of 4 answers, and then you are looking for the most correct answer. So keep that in mind. And worst case scenario, if you can't decide out of the 2 that you have which one is the best one, then you can just pick one and you have a 50% chance that you get the right one. But then at least you have previously eliminated 2 of the 4 options, so then you have a 50% chance. Best case scenario, you know which one is the right one, you tick that one, and then you move on. Tip number 8, don't think like a manager. This is an advice that has come up so many times in so many resources, in so many articles, in so many videos. It's been regurgitated left and right. And I think it has some merit here and there, but for the most part, for the CISSP exam, I think this is outdated advice, and I think you should steer clear from it. What the best mindset in that regard is, answer the question. Just answer the question. There's no need to go in different tangents and try to find hidden meanings behind words that are there, or try to assume things. Don't assume things. Just answer the question, whatever the question is. You just want to find the answer that is the most correct answer out of the 4 options that you have. And also consider something else, which is, if you were to choose one out of the 4 answers, which one would you go for? Assuming that you would eliminate all of the other answers, assuming that none of them exists in that CISSP world that you're building, which one are you going for? You're looking for the most correct answer. You're not a manager necessarily. You might be an analyst, you might be a pen tester in that scenario, you might be a CEO or a CIO or a CISO in that scenario. You could be a project manager as well, but you are not a manager that is looking to think like a manager to answer the questions. Of course, the CISSP is a management certification, and that is probably why this advice came from, but don't think like a manager, answer the question, and then move on. Simple as that. Tip 9 is, don't dwell on a single question. I mentioned earlier that time management is important. So dwelling on a question for too long is bad for your time management, of course, but it's also bad for your motivation and for your pace. I would suggest that you don't spend too much time on a question if it's going to derail your pace too much. Of course, like I said before, there can be cases where you need 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes to go through one single question, and that is fine. But in general, I would recommend to not dwell too much on a single question. There's some moments where you will have a what the reaction, like, what is going on? What is this question? What are those answers? I have no idea what this question and answers are about. There's 2 things that could be happening in that situation. Number 1 is that you just don't know the question and the answer. You have never read about this topic before. It's totally new to you. It's like unknown waters, undiscovered land. You have no clue about it. Fine. We don't know everything, and that's totally fine. Move on. The second scenario is that you're looking at a beta question. So you're looking at a question that is not really a question, that you're not going to be graded against, either if you answer it correctly or not correctly. I had some cases where I actually was 99% sure that what I'm looking at is a beta question. In that case, still answer or try to answer the question correctly, but don't dwell on it too much. At the end of the day, you're gonna lose time, and I think there's more chances that you will get later to fix any mistakes if you dwell on one single question and you don't get it right. Then at least if you don't dwell on it, then you will have a chance further down the line to fix that issue and to to improve your score that way. Keep in mind that you can't go back, but don't look at it in a negative way. If you can't find the right answer, move on. You will have more chances further down the line, and it's better to save the time for future questions. Okay, number 10, we are here, the last one, and one of the most important ones as well. And that is, don't let the cat scratch you. Don't let the cat scratch you. The computerized adaptive testing is a real pain in the rear. I won't use any other words. You know what I'm talking about, but don't let the cat bring you down. And to be honest, the cat is absolutely brutal. I felt it quite a lot when I was going through the exam. I felt like it was really trying to get me, and it's gonna do the same to you. In my case, it was all about authentication and authorization. It really hammered me and bombarded me with questions from that domain because it knew that this is my kryptonite. This is my weakness, and it's gonna get me. Don't let that hammering fool you or dissuade you or demotivate you. It's designed to do that. It's designed to find your weakness and focus on it. It's like a wound that it wants to keep open and keep pouring salt on the wound. Persist, be focused, be conscious of the fact that it's there to do its thing, it's doing what it's designed to do. Your goal is to answer the question correctly and move on. Don't let the cat scratch you, don't let it demotivate you, and you will also hold the printout that says you passed the CISSP exam. So good luck out there. How was the examination day and experience overall? For me, at least, I had woken up early. Unfortunately, I hadn't slept very much the night before. Then I had my coffee because, of course, I'm a coffee addict and I'm very happy to admit that. And then I arrived at the test center half an hour before the actual planned time. Of course, I had to go through the identification process. Be sure that also when you go to the examination center, you bring at least 2 forms of identification. That could be, for example, your identity and your passport or something equivalent, your driver's license. And then also consider the fact that you need to go through fingerprinting or palm reading process so that they keep your data for further identification. After I arrived at the center and I went through that identification process, it was just smooth sailing. I went inside the examination center. It depends on your case, of course. I won't go into too much detail about how that was, but that was more or less it. And then after a while, I started with the exam. Keep in mind that you have to read the non-disclosure agreement for the exam before the exam starts. But also keep in mind, and that's important, that the time is running during the time you are reading the NDA. So the amount of time you have to read and sign the NDA is limited. So pay attention to that. I've heard stories or I've read stories on Reddit about people that went overboard with reading the NDA and they got disqualified. And that is something that could happen. I'm not sure if it has been resolved by IC2, but keep in mind that you only have a limited amount of time to read the NDA. One thing you can do is you can read the NDA before the actual exam, and then you have read it already, you just hit I accept or whatever tick box there is in there, and then you're done. As soon as the exam started, in my case, the first few questions were a bit on the easy side, then they started getting difficult, and then they kind of balanced out with the occasional difficult sections. And then of course I had to be sure that I follow proper time management, and then I would take some breaks here and there. I would just stop for half a second just to stretch and to maybe look forward ahead or somewhere around me so that I can refocus afterwards and resume my examination process. And I think it's a good idea to do that. I also remember that I never felt like I was failing. Of course, it was a challenging exam. I know there's a lot of people that claim that they felt like they were failing the whole time, but that was not the case for me, and I was about, let's say, 70% sure that I had passed the exam by the time the examination was over on the 100th question. So that's a bit about my experience, and again, that will depend on your case, how you go about it. You step out of your examination center and you get your printout which says, "Congratulations, you passed." Now what? Well, after your examination, you have a few more things to do before you're officially certified. Up until the point that, number one, you pay your certification fees at ISC2, and number 2, you manage to get endorsed by ISC2 or by a colleague of yours or someone you know, then you are not officially CISSP certified. You need to do those two things until you get certified. There's a process for the endorsement. As I said, there's self-endorsement, so you can then provide to ISC2 all of your past experience credentials, your contracts, your job descriptions, whatever they might ask you. Please provide all of those to IC2 so that they can review and assess your case, or you can direct them to someone you know that is a former colleague or a current colleague that knows that you're skilled in at least 2 of the 8 domains and can attest that you are skilled enough to be CISSP certified, and they will be reached out by ISC2 in order to confirm that you indeed have what it takes to be CISSP certified. This whole process of endorsement might take a while, so don't worry about it too much. It's gonna take about 4 to 6 weeks depending on the situation, and there might actually be some back and forth with the organization. They might have some questions for you, so be ready for that. But after 4 to 6 weeks, expect that your application for certification will be formally approved, and then you will be with the stamp certified CISSP. So, well done. Also keep in mind that until the point that you actually get certified, you are not allowed to claim that you are certified, whether that's on LinkedIn or some other platform or in your resume. You're not supposed to claim that you are CISSP certified. You can claim that you provisionally passed the CISSP exam, but not that you're certified. Keep that in mind, because they might come back chasing you and then you have violated the IC2 code of conduct. By the way, quick tip, the IC2 code of conduct is testable in the exam, so keep that in mind that you can be tested on that. So bonus tip. And then finally, the physical certificate, the physical CISSP certificate is going to arrive at your doorstep in about 2 months, more or less, after your certification, the completion of your certification and your application to be formally certified is finalized. So be patient, in 2 months' time, more or less, it's going to be there. And I'm also sharing, meanwhile, some footage of my actual unboxing, doing it with you right now, of my CISSP certificate, physical copy, so you can see what's in the box as well. So have a look at it and have fun. And then my last step, and probably your last step as well, will be to find a frame that is appropriate for your certificate, hang it somewhere nice where it's visible, and then you can be proud and happy looking at it and seeing that you succeeded in passing your CISSP exam. Well done. So that was it. We went through a journey, we explored resources for the CISSP, strategies to address the exam, tips and tricks to help you pass the CISSP, and we're here. I'm thankful you managed to stick around until the end, and I'm hoping that you got some value out of it. If it did, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and let's grow this ITGRC community, and hit that bell icon so that you can get notified every time there's a new video from yours truly. But now, because I spoke too much, it's time for you to tell me down in the comments below, how is it going with your CISSP journey and what challenges are you facing? Let us know in the comments down below, and let's all interact with each other so that we can help each other pass the CISSP exam and become better ITGRC professionals. Last but not least, hack the like button, because that's going to be your first step into joining the amazing world of ITGRC. As always, stay safe and secure both in the digital and the physical world. Until next time, take care.